Jumping back into our recaps of Week 18 in the NFL, we got to take a look at the Broncos securing the final playoff spot in the AFC with just an insane finish, really, for the entire season. Not only for Denver, but really for the entire playoff scene in the AFC, because it was the perfect scenario for really the Broncos, not really so much for the Bengals and the Miami Dolphins, obviously, but really for the Broncos. If you take into account not how the season ended and how great it was for them, but a couple weeks before this, where we saw how Denver had the playoff future in their hands, much like the Buccaneers did for a couple weeks now, not just for Week 18, but they lost a very close game to the Chargers that really would have helped them secure a spot. Then, in another game where they were facing a direct rival in the Cincinnati Bengals, they lost a grueling game in overtime, which was just very harsh on them. And if they would have lost this game and just crashed out of the playoffs, by losing their last three games would have been completely devastating, like I mentioned last Friday, I want to say. So it was great to all see, just culminate for them to arguably play their best game of the entire season to send them to the playoffs was really cool to see. And with all the hype and speculation with the really the Bengals, because the Dolphins, they weren't really looking good in their game at all. But the Bengals put a lot of pressure on them, obviously, with their win over the Steelers. The Bengals did everything that they needed to, right? They just needed to win and just watch the games on Sunday to see it all go their way. And they almost got everything to fall, right? They got two out of the three things that needed to happen. But unfortunately for them, and really our main focus in this segment is talking about the Broncos and how, this was their last chance. And they really came out all business, not messing around whatsoever, because quite frankly, they just destroyed the Kansas City Chiefs backups, really, in a game that was 38 to nothing in order for the Denver Broncos to go back to the playoffs for the first time since 2015. Kansas City had not been also shut out since 2012, over almost 13 years ago, that the last time the Chiefs were shut out. So this was a pretty important game. Of course, there's no Patrick Mahomes, no Kelsey, no real starters, right, playing, but still, I mean, this wasn't just like a 17 to 15 game where the Broncos barely squeaked in. They went out there with a mindset to, regardless of who was playing, they were going to go full throttle, trying to go out there and prove why they deserve to be in the playoffs. And I thought they did exactly that. They were off to a hot start, the Broncos, and really Bo Nix in this game by setting a franchise record for most completions to start a game with 18 straight. And they scored touchdowns on their first three drives of this game. And also, Bo Nix set a franchise record for completion percentage at 89% in this game as well. So all of that just suggests that the Broncos really knew what the assignment was, and they weren't going to take, anything for granted, or they weren't going to second guess anything. They weren't going to be conservative. They really went out there and, like I said, played an exceptional game, which they needed to for them to get into the playoffs for the first time in almost 10 years. To get back really was a special moment. And not only was the offense great, Bo Nix played a fantastic game, but also their defense. They led the NFL in sacks with 62. They held Carson Wentz to only 98 passing yards, and he was only 10 of 17 on the day. And he got the start, obviously, because the Chiefs were resting all their starters, right? So that's the thing that is always going to be brought up in this case. But, I mean, being shut out and winning 38-0, I think just sends a much more louder message than, like I said before, than just winning like 17 to like 13 or something like that and just really relying on your defense. This was a complete team effort that I was pretty pleased to see, just as a neutral sort of voice in all of this, or at least I try to be. It was cool because I mentioned last week too in our preview that I felt like the Broncos really deserved to be in it, right? I felt like if you're going to take the three teams, right, you're going to take the Dolphins, the Bengals, and the Broncos, right? I felt like if you looked at the culmination of their seasons from where it started to where it ended, the Broncos getting off to a rough start, but continuing to trust this process, to trust what Sean Payton was saying, to believe in their defense, and eventually believe that Bo Nix was going to become that guy that Sean Payton really believed he was capable of being. And for all that to kind of develop over the course of the season and see from where they started to where they ended, I thought they really made the most compelling case to make the playoffs, whereas the Bengals started off slow, and it became like a running trend for them that they always start slow, and that you always kind of felt like, oh, because they had Joe Burrow, they were just gonna click it into gear and eventually just make the playoffs, right? Because that's just what they do, and it didn't work out that way, obviously. And for the Miami Dolphins as well, they were just dealing with a lot of injuries, and you know, if you can't win in below 50 to 40 degree weather. I know that's kind of like the running joke, but it's a serious thing. If you have such a bad and glaring record in weather like that, I don't think you necessarily deserve or really need to be in the playoffs as well. So I thought the Broncos, to me, made the most compelling case to be in it, and it showed through the score and how Bo Nix played, and also their defense. One thing that's interesting, though, that I did find out about this game was that because the Chiefs were resting their starters, and the last time they did play was on Christmas Day, and that they obviously won't play again until the divisional round of the playoffs, which is January 18th or 19th, that's going to be at least 24 days off for the starters, which is insane. Over 3 weeks off. I know they're still going to practice and everything, but not playing in a game and really being fresh for that amount of time it's just next level. Like obviously the Chiefs have been here before, right? They know what they're doing. They know how to prepare themselves for the playoffs, right? Not just acquiring home field advantage, right? But making sure they have it all locked up before the last couple weeks here, so they get those few extra days off, and it always ends up paying off. So it's just another reminder that the Chiefs are essentially playing chess while everybody's still playing checkers. That's a huge advantage, obviously. So that was something I really didn't take into account. And also, this win for Denver over the Kansas City Chiefs was only the second time they've beaten them in their last 19 games between each other. And more on Bo Nix also. He threw for 4 touchdowns, which brought him to 29 total touchdowns on the year, which was only 2 touchdowns shy of the NFL record by a rookie quarterback for passing touchdowns in their rookie year. The record is still 31 held by Justin Herbert in 2020, obviously in his first year. So, I mean, you're not comparing them, but that's pretty good company to be in. And not only that, but to play him in the division each and every year, along with Patrick. The AFC West is going to be pretty fun to kind of keep track of over the next, 7 to 8 years or something like that with these guys at quarterback. So that's awesome to see as well. And just overall, I thought a much needed win, a dominant performance by Denver as well. And not only that, now we can kind of look ahead and talk about this matchup with the Buffalo Bills a little bit, because it's not only that the fact that they have to go to Buffalo and play a potential MVP in Josh Allen, but they're also going to see a familiar face, right? Because for whatever reason, if you guys weren't aware, Von Miller is on the Buffalo Bills now, and it's been exactly until the day that they play in the wild card this upcoming weekend. It'll be 3,255 days after the Super Bowl in which the Broncos won in 2016 over the Carolina Panthers that Von Miller has played against, or with, in this case, with the Denver Broncos. And now he's going to see his former team this upcoming weekend in the playoffs, which was pretty interesting, pretty cool to me that, they're going to have that familiarity there, and they're going to have to try and beat one of their best players in that franchise's history this upcoming weekend as well. And funny enough, also, this matchup between the Bills and the Broncos are the only two teams that have managed to beat the Kansas City Chiefs so far. And for whatever reason, if the Broncos pull up the upset of upsets and defeat the Bills, they're going to have a date with the Kansas City Chiefs potentially in the divisional round. So that's also something that's, still a long ways away and still a hypothetical, but it's in the back of my mind a little bit. But it'll be interesting how this game kind of goes because the Broncos have a great pass rush. They put a lot of man coverage because they're able to with Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, and McMillan in there as their cornerbacks. And the fact that they get to the quarterback so fast, too, makes your secondary look that much better as well, obviously. So the Buffalo Bills, they're good. They have good playmakers with Keon Coleman getting better. Amari Cooper's obviously great. Khalil Shakir's very underrated. So they got good players to kind of match up against them, but I wouldn't necessarily say that, excuse me, that they're like man beaters or something like that, right? Like they're not, like in that sort of matchup, you'd immediately think like a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase, right? I don't think the Bills receivers are necessarily that right now. So it'll be really interesting to see how they kind of match up in that response. So, the Broncos have also matched up pretty well against the Bengals' high-powered offense, in their last game. So that'll also be interesting to see how they take the lessons from that and apply it here to the explosiveness of the Buffalo Bills offense. And it's also important to take into account how the Bills are still undefeated at home. So it's going to take a lot. It's going to be a tall task for a rookie and Bo Nix to go in there and lead this effort to upset the number 2 team in Buffalo. But it would really make a lot of people look at Bo Nix a lot differently if he was able to do this. Jaden Daniels is looked at as the best rookie in this class, but if there was ever an alternate universe where Bo Nix was able to defeat Josh Allen, not only would it look really bad for Josh Allen, right? Because that's just how it goes. Bo Nix would really cement himself in some elite company, I think, if he was able to do that. But we're not going to go into the ins and outs of it yet, but just kind of giving you guys some kind of notes on this matchup before we preview it later on this week. So that's everything we took from the Broncos win over the Kansas City Chiefs. And now we're not going to move too far away from the AFC West because we're also going to bring up the Chargers' big win over the Las Vegas Raiders. What did this win mean for the Chargers in terms of seeding? And are the Chargers the most dangerous wildcard team in the AFC playoffs? We're going to answer that question when we return in just a few seconds.